but you one of the best investors, and you always say at the bottom of your tagline, make more mistakes. And make new mistakes. So anyway, if anyone doesn't know Esther, she's known everywhere. So
Whatever.
yeah.
Thank you. So I'm not sure if this logistics works, but whatever. So I loved what Sherry said, especially about intrinsic motivation, because that's the only kind of motivation that lasts. And I'm going to be pretty personal today, not revealing great secrets, but simply, it's going to be a fair amount about my view of the world rather than what the world should do, because there's a lot of wisdom here already about what the world should do, and I'm going to try and just give one person's useful perspective. So, to start, two interesting things have happened to me recently that are about thinking long term. We think of life as a race, but it's much more a relay race. I mean, I'm kind of glad I'm going to die because I don't need to finish everything. I just need to find the most important things. I tripped and damaged my leg this morning, and if I was going to live forever, it was like, oh my God, this scar is going to be here forever. But, as long as my leg lasts, as long as the rest of me does, I'll be fine. So I have a nonprofit, it's called Wellville. We work in 5 small communities around the U.S., and these are kind of typical U.S. rural communities. There's a thin veneer of nice, richish people at the top who try and do good things. There's a missing middle class, and then there are poor people who might be white, might be black, might be native populations, or whatever. And these are the people we are trying not to help, but to encourage and prod them to build long-term institutions for themselves rather than live short-term. We were in Lake County, California 4 or 5 weeks ago with about 60 people from each of the 5 communities. One of the communities was Lake County, California itself. And we were welcomed by a group of local indigenous people who talked to us about their history and how it was erased and how they were basically enslaved. And, stuff like, hey, I'm a woke, nice white lady, I know, but I didn't at all. And we all did, to some extent, what I'm trying to do today, which is be really personal and think about not yourself, but your role in history, your grandparents. Where did you come from? And where are you going to go? What are you going to leave? One of the speakers on Monday, it was just incredibly powerful. I can't do anything like that. But just, we were all pulled together as a group and became much more personally engaged. The second day he said to us, I talk to people like you all the time. It's my job. I'm a tribal leader and so forth. But this was the first time I didn't have to go home and take a bath and heal myself.
What? Take a bath and kill yourself?
Heal myself. Heal.
Oh, heal.
Sorry.
I was like a little concerned there for a second.
And I thought about how the difference between black people whose identity stands out and they face one kind of trauma, and people whose identity is hidden and erased and they face another kind of trauma. And there's, rich people face trauma too, whatever, but that was very compelling. Then I basically had to write an epilogue to a book about my father, what it was like to grow up with a guy who was a famous scientist and sort of the epitome of success and STEM and so forth and so on. And I realized how wonderful my childhood was. I was telling Greg, I wanted to run away because I thought it was really cool, like all these great stories about kids running away and having adventures. But there was nothing my parents did that didn't make sense. And so I had no excuse to run away. Kind of disappointed. I did leave home early. I spent half a year when I was supposed to be in college living with my boyfriend in Morocco, and my parents were, cool, do what you want, but you're responsible for the consequences, and we're sure you will learn something. So what I'd like to talk about next, and then I'm going to finish with a specific story, is what it was like to grow up that way, and how personally, I think I've had an ideal life. Not without a great deal of luck, but it comes from feeling free to try things out, being curious, always asking questions. My basic career was as a journalist. Whatever happens to you, you can make it less boring by asking good questions. If you ever sit next to someone at a dinner or on an airplane, they probably know something that you don't know, and it's your job to find out from them. I once, as a reporter, I once interviewed a guy who, he did something really boring. It was in the insurance industry. And I wrote a really good story about him because his company was facing interesting problems. And then I met him later at some event, and again, he was actually a kind of boring guy. It's really up to you to make things interesting, to ask why. And in honor of this occasion, I wore this T-shirt, which is from a company called Xcore that I invested in and was actually on the board of, that went bankrupt. And I learned so much more from that experience than from all my successful investments that really didn't need my help. And Xcore learned a lot, including how much the field, now I'm getting back to the point, how much the field of STEM needs not just brilliant engineers, but good managers. One of the big problems with the space industry is, let me say this, well, I won't be polite, too many Elon Musks and not enough Wynne Shotwells. Wynne Shotwell is the adult supervision in the room at SpaceX, and I always imagined her going in with Elon saying, okay, Elon, now be quiet, don't say a word, we're talking to government officials now, you just let me take care of things. And the company's been very successful and sold to NASA, and I attribute it to Gwen, and who's a great STEM role model. So the story I want to tell to finish up, in Wellville, we work in these 5 communities. There's 6 of us, each of us has one community. I do the community of Muskegon, Michigan. Anybody here? Okay, they're on the other side of the state from Detroit. They're on the lake across from Milwaukee. Again, they had a very prosperous manufacturing industry. They did a lot of car parts, but Detroit kind of stole all their thunder a century ago. They had lumber, their port, but they kind of fell on hard times. The city of Grand Rapids, which is not too far away, does not consider Muskegon part of them. And so they're kind of a forgotten place. And they were one of 42 communities that applied to be part of Wellville when it started 10 years ago. And I would never have thought that I would fall in love with this place or its people, but they're amazing. They're trying to rebuild their community. They want to build a place where people do leave to go to college or to learn something and then come back because they love the community and want to help. And that's really what our goal is for all of the Wellvilles. We come in kind of through health. We are very careful. We're not innovating. And we're not bringing digital technology to poor people. We're more like coaches of a team that needs someone who has their back, that asks them good questions, prods a little, but we're not giving them fish, we're not teaching them how to fish. We're coaching them as they build their own sustainable fishing schools. And this is a 10-year nonprofit project, which is, it's a real luxury in the world of philanthropy or whatever. And we don't have contracts with these communities. It's not like we don't get the money, but they also don't pay us. If our advice doesn't make sense, they don't have to listen to us. So there's that, we have to foster their intrinsic motivation. We're not a foundation that bribes them to do what we think they should do. And I love that, because it really keeps us honest. And we don't experiment on people. However, I did have this one idea, which was to use continuous glucose monitors as kind of an educational tool, because I met somebody from Abbott, so that kids could understand their own metabolism and they could understand the metabolism of the food companies that like to sell them Coca-Cola and Twinkies and, you know, stuff that's good for the company's bottom line but bad for the kids' health. And that didn't work out, so we switched to Oura Rings, which aren't as close to metabolism but are basically focused on sleep. And there was a local doctor who was running this project, working for Western Michigan School of Medicine, funded by Stryker. And so I learned a lot about everything I've done in my life has been in education. I learned a lot about IRBs, independent review boards, and, you know, how studies are done. And as I said, we didn't want, especially in minority communities, experimenting in healthcare is a known and horrible. So that's not what we were doing, and we wanted to make it very clear. We were looking at this ring as an educational tool. Yeah. And so what did we measure? We did not measure the kids' behavior. We did not measure did they lose weight, which is what kept slipping into the IRB, and I kept taking it out because we did not want to tell these kids what to do. We did not want, they get bullied all the time, whether it's by real bullies, by teachers, by medical workers, like, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta eat right, you gotta sleep more. We measured sense of agency. In other words, if I want to sleep more, I've learned how to do it. I've learned how this works, but it's up to me. Nobody's gonna grade me on how much I slept or what I ate. We want to empower kids. And there's one sort of sad thing I wanted to end with, and this is about girls and boys, and then I'll figure out something cheerful to say. But there was one interesting study that fascinated me about this study trying to get kids to eat right. And the girls listened to, you'll be prettier, you'll look better, you'll lose weight, the sort of be docile and responsive and follow these rules and you'll be successful. And the boys listen to, the food companies are manipulating you. Don't let them